Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Think Curiously podcast. Now, this week I'm joined by someone who I've known for quite some time from around Coleraine. He tells me he was a bit of a footballer when he was younger, and I kind of seen the evidence of that when we played and knocked about together in football pitches around Coleraine. So, Chrissy, you're very welcome on the podcast this week, and we're going to delve in just a little bit on your story and your history, talk a little bit about your life, depression, and how you've overcome that, and the life that you currently lead. So, Chrissy, why don't you hit us off and just introduce yourself to the listeners and the viewers?
Hi everyone, on Gary's podcast. My name's Chrissy. Yep, so I grew up around Coleraine, lived there most of my life, knowing Gary, playing football. I definitely wasn't a good footballer, Gary was. And in the last 4 odd years, I've been living in Belfast, got married, moved to Belfast, living in Belfast, working in Belfast. I'm very thankful Gary's had me on this evening because I'd say a lot of my life I've struggled a lot with depression. And just say thank you to Gary, let me come on and just get my story out there. If it can help one person, that's what I'm here for.
And that's the key, isn't it? Like it's having that ability to open up and tell your story. Because you and I chatted before we came on a few days back about the power of sharing stories, and we will touch on it later on when we get into the depth of your story about the counselling stuff. But you felt like a real need to share your story, didn't you? You kind of felt that, well, if I've lived through it, and hopefully other people by hearing my story will be able to take some inspiration from it as well.
Yeah, Gary, the reason I want to do this is I think when I went through it, there wasn't really anyone there to help, no one to speak out to. I was kind of lonely. And I do know that there's people of all ages out there who maybe feel like they don't have anyone to reach out to. And I just want them just to hear my story. And I'm not coming on for like a pity party or anything. I'm literally coming on here to reach out, let other people realize that we all go through it. I went through it and came out a better person the other side.
Yeah, and that's it. And so I know we had spoke again before we came on just how things had developed for you over time, and it was around 2013. I think your story actually starts with you maybe getting into kind of situations that weren't exactly positive for your mental state or your physical state in many ways.
2013, I literally had finished a relationship. I remember before I got into the relationship, I would never say I was a thin, skinny guy, but I wasn't a big guy either. But when I finished that relationship, gained a lot of weight, self-confidence was shot clean out the window. I think I got up to about 18, 19 stone. Relationship ended. I was living in Coleraine, was just depressed. Um, I was working in Korean Uni doing security, and I met up with an old friend who was a mature student who needed someone to rent a house with, and he was moving to Portstewart, Gary. So I decided I would move to Portstewart with him. Probably wasn't the best decision in the sense that everyone knows Portstewart is seaside town and there's not much to do, more or less go out partying and drinking. Uh, I started to do a lot of drinking, Gary. At the time, I didn't know I was depressed. I'd never suffered depression in my life. So for me, it was just, I was very sad and very down, and the alcohol for me was the answer. And, that's what I started doing. And that was my downfall to begin with.
I think a lot of people can probably relate, when you've had a bad day. I'm the same, like when you've had a bad day at work, or as it is at the minute with United when they're up and down. I know you're a Chelsea fan, so I'll not even go there, but but you know what it's like, when you have a bad day at work or football hasn't went well for you. The first thing I do is, I drink rum, so I would grab for a rum, or if the pubs are open, I'd go for a Guinness. And you don't really think anything of it, do you? It's just, I'm going for one or I'm going for two. But I suppose when that is happening constantly, and maybe when you're not aware of kind of the cycle that you're getting into, and it just becomes maybe second nature, or in your case, as you said, you've moved in with somebody and it was, a friend at the house, and maybe they were doing it, and then you thought, well, this isn't going too bad, so I might as well start doing it. And then before you know it, you can pick the story up from there, but before you know it, I think you just get into that kind of routine.
Yeah, so this guy was like a mature student, so he would have been running around with older students around, back then I was early 30s, just 30, 31. So these guys were 25 to 30 odd. So there were people of your own age. So you know, they were going to house parties, and maybe it wasn't mad house parties, but it was still house parties. And that was every Saturday. So it'd be every Friday or Saturday night, have a wee drink with these students. You know, it's a bit of, so we call it a bit of crack, a bit of fun. But for me, it developed from a Saturday night drinking to an every night drinking. So I would have been doing me working at the uni, so I started doing day shifts at the uni. I used to do night shifts, so when I was doing night shifts, it was better for me because you couldn't go out. But then I was pushed over to day shifts, so you were doing 7 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon, and then you were going home, maybe having your dinner, and you just knew, let's go home and have a drink. But I used to be a boy that could have two or three and stop. You know, I got to the stage I couldn't stop. And I was never a spirit drinker, and then I started hitting spirits, started drinking a lot of like heavy spirits. Before I knew it, it spiraled, and I was in deep depression.
Do you find that at that time that were you making excuses for yourself that it's okay to drink? Was that it, or was it just that's what everybody else was doing, so you thought maybe that's what I have to do?
I kind of think I done it. Do you ever hear when I don't know, maybe many people have told you this through, if you've talked to people about depression, you wear the mask. So I was going out with a big happy face mask on, drinking, trying to be part of the crowd scene. Obviously, it was false because I was going home, I was taking the mask off, and I wasn't that person. I was a complete opposite person. It was like you were faking your happiness. You know, you were going out and being like, "Look at me, I'm party, I'm this and I'm that," and then you were coming home and you take the mask off, and it's just that. You ever see the advertisement where the guy takes the mask off, and it's. But I remember people saying to me about that. You come home and you take your mask off, and I was thinking, that's nonsense. And then it happened to me. So I was taking the mask off, Gary, and I was sitting at home drinking, depressed and bored, and just didn't did not like life, mate. But when I was out around people, I didn't want them seeing that. I was embarrassed in a way of them seeing that. So you put on the big happy face and you pretended to be a happy person. And that's what it was with the alcohol. I think I was trying to convince myself that the alcohol made me happy, but in actual fact, it made me worse.
And I suppose in that situation, only really hindsight allows you to look back now and see that. It's not something that at that time where obviously you were aware that you were going out and you were being this other person, and then when you're going home, that's when you really you felt the depression hitting home. But you're not at that moment in time thinking, well, that I am doing this for any other reason than to hide who I really am, if you know what I mean. You like that must be a
Yeah, it
hard thing
was.
to try and understand.
Sorry, it was a hard. It was hard because if you've never suffered depression in your life, you don't know what you're feeling. You don't know it's depression. You can hear about people going, so and so's depressed and so and so's depressed, but until you go through it yourself, you don't actually know you are depressed.
Yeah,
You just think that your life's rubbish, so you fake it and you try and go out and make it good.
yeah.
But you're not really making it good. You're not your real self. And I was just going home every night, getting worse. And then when I was going home, you had a thought when you went home, you had to stop the drinking. I just carried on. Um, and that's what drew me to possible, well, more or less attempted suicide in 2013.
And it was. Do you think that was a combination then of the continued drinking and the continued pressure that you felt then to give yourself or give that image of yourself that wasn't really you? Because as you said, you came home when you were taking the mask off, and then if someone had said that to you previously a number of years back, you'd have thought, well, what are they talking about? But now you're actually in that situation. Do you think that was like a catalyst then of the alcohol together, plus how you were feeling, that it kind of led you towards committing or attempting to commit suicide?
So I think what happened, Gordon, was you have to keep this big persona on that you're happy. So when you're out around your mates and stuff, you don't want them thinking you're depressed because I'm okay. Sometimes, I mean, I know I'm doing a podcast and this probably sounds hypocritical of what I'm going to say. I'm normally a quite private person, so I don't want to go out and go to everybody, oh, I'm depressed and I want to end my life. No one wants to hear that in the night out. But then I think what happens is when you go out in a night out and you see someone who's too over happy and too overjoyed, and you look at them and you go, how can anyone be that happy? It's not natural. I was trying to be like that. I was trying too hard to be happy and overjoyed. So I was taking the drink to be happy. But when I went home, the drink was making me worse in the depression. So I would say on a fateful night in, I think it was 2013. I think it was around, it's either March, April, May time. I can't remember, so long ago. But I remember pre-planning my suicide. I planned it, and it's horrible to say that I planned it. I'm not. I would never ask it. I mean, I'm not saying anyone out there that you should pre-plan anything like that. That's it's the worst thing I ever done. But I sat for many nights in my bedroom, drinking and crying and upset, and I just got to the point, Corey, where I was like, if this is life, I don't want to live.
Mm.
I mean, I'm fake. I'm going out and pretending to be someone I'm not, and then coming home and drinking all that drink to pretend to be happy was making me 10 times worse when I came home.
Mm.
So in 2013, spent a week planning to take my own life, sort of. Um, I'm obviously still here now, but prepared it all, I planned it all. Um, I done it. I actually went through with it. Um, in that moment, it was like I, it's hard for me to say this because I don't want people thinking I'm encouraging to go and do it. I don't want people. If I say what I'm going to say, people will go, "Well, you're saying when you done that, you felt I wouldn't say great, but you felt relieved." In the moment when I committed suicide, there was no pain. But I'm not telling people to go and commit suicide for no pain. That's not what I'm saying. In my moment, there was no pain. It was just nothing for that moment. And then I woke up in hospital. I don't know how I got there. I woke up and my uni friend was there, and he said that he came home and he found me and he took me to hospital.
It's I'm sure it's hard for some people to hear that, and I'm sure that some people might feel just a little bit maybe on edge about it. But what I think is, and it's all credit to you, Chrissy, for doing it, is for putting your heart in your sleeve. Because when you talk so openly and candidly about something like that, I don't think you'll understand just how much that's going to help other people understand their thoughts. I mean, because let's be honest, you could have left half that detail out and just said you woke up in hospital, right? Do you know what I mean? And you said earlier on about not. I don't think people take that the wrong way. I think people will take you at face value, and that that's a very honest and open opinion of a very very tough subject to talk about. But it's your story, and you've got the right to own it, and you've got the right to tell it. And I think you're doing it for all of the right reasons. So
I was
all
just
credit to
scared
you.
to tell. Sorry,
All
sorry, I
right.
didn't know you were talking. You didn't mean to cut you off, mate.
No,
I
you're
was
grand.
just scared. I was just so scared to be open and honest about it because in that moment when I've done it, I'm not saying I felt happy. I didn't feel anything. I didn't. Obviously, in that moment when you've tried it and you've passed out or whatever's happened, your conscious mind isn't functioning, so you're not hurting anymore, but you're not happy either. So doing it didn't make me any happier, but doing it didn't make me any sadder. I was kind of in the middle.
Right.
I was just scared to tell my story open and honestly in case people are just like, oh, is he saying that, suicide's the answer? Suicide's definitely not the answer. I mean, the guilt and shame I've had in my life from doing it. I mean, Corey, I've never, I mean, I know the podcast is going to go out and people are going to find out, but there's a lot of my family I've never told I committed suicide. There's a lot of my family I didn't tell them I ever attempted it because I didn't want to hurt them. Because, I mean, how selfish was I? In that moment, I only thought about myself. In my life, I'm not hurting. In my life, who does it hurt? Hurts my mum, hurt my dad when he was alive. It hurts my brothers, my sisters, my family. The impact would have been on them.
Mm-hmm.
They would have been the ones who would have had to go through their whole life going, I had a brother who never spoke out. If he had only came to me, but he didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And that guilt ate me alive and hasn't let me alive up until now. I mean, that guilt's just, I wish I'd never done it. I wished I had never tried it. I wish I'd never attempted it.
I know we spoke just before, whenever we talked about coming on, was it last week sometime we chatted, and you told me that, you know, some of your close friends and family hadn't known that. And for you to come on and do that, I mean, it shows an incredible level of development in your own self, because we will speak about it later on, I'm sure. But the point you're at in your life now, where you've went through that counselling, and I think you told me that at the end of your last counselling session, or a recent one at least, you kind of said, right, I'm ready to tell my story. You know, and that's
That's
the
it,
reason that
Gary.
you're on.
That's it, Gary. Counselling was like, we'll get to that down the line, but I'm at the point now where that was 8 years ago. I tried to commit suicide. I know there's a few friends, maybe on a drunken night, I've probably told them, look, I tried suicide once, and they maybe think, maybe because they're drunk, they don't believe you. But on a sober mind, I've never came to my mom and said, I'm sorry to tell you this, but 8 years ago I tried to take my life, because I mean, I I didn't want to hurt them. And I didn't want to hurt my mom. I didn't want to hurt my family and then feel, why did you never come to us? Why did it get to that? So it's a big secret. There's a few people out there who maybe listen to this and go, oh, he's been drunk one night and told me that he tried suicide. Oh, it must be true. He's probably going to be listening to this who go, well, he's told me that already.
Mm-hmm.
But it's okay maybe telling friends or people that you don't see all the time, but to be around your family. I mean, I know I live in Belfast now, but when I lived there, to be around your family quite a lot. And all of us, I know from the North Coast, a lot of us are family orientated. We love being
Yeah.
around our families. To be around your family every day after telling that, I just couldn't look at them.
Was there a part of you, Chrissy, then, you know, after you had done it and, you know, you'd recovered and come out of hospital and stuff, was there a part of you like that was almost guarding it, like you were scared in certain situations that it would come out and you would have no control of releasing that, like you're having now? You know, you've got the control over your story now, but back then, you know, was it a kind of a guarded secret that you didn't want to let anybody else know, and then you felt that anxiety of keeping that within yourself?
It was like, do you ever hear when someone says they've got a dirty secret? That's what it was like. But back then, I was very vulnerable. I'm not as positive in my life as I am now. And I'm not as, I would say now I'm probably the strongest I've been in years. I've gone through a lot of things there recently too that it's hurt me, but I don't know where the strengths came from, but I'm very strong now. And this is probably why now it's took to this year to come out and tell my story. But back then, I think I was very weak, very vulnerable.
Mm.
So I kept it and I didn't want to tell anyone. I think the reason I didn't tell my family is deep down, I didn't want to hurt them.
Right.
I love my family and I've always loved my family. And I'm very close to my mum. Um, I, she could, I know my mum's like, she'd be the type of person to go, don't worry, it's okay. You don't beat yourself up about it. But then I would know my mum would sit and think and worry,
Yeah.
do it again? Is there a time, you know, I didn't want my mum running on edge every day of her life thinking, am I going to get a phone call that he's actually tried this again?
Yeah.
So I just didn't tell her. I mean, she'll probably hear it through this podcast. I still haven't really told her properly. I told her that it's a lot of depression. I thought about suicide, but I never told her I attempted it because I was Gary. If I never had done your podcast, I probably would have let my mom pass away and never told her because I just don't hurt her.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I've done your podcast, and if she doesn't hear it through this, I'm now at a place where I'll just tell her.
Yeah.
I mean, she's got the right to know. People might say that's terrible. You never told your family, but I have to say to those people, when you're in that position, you know, hindsight's a fine thing. People could look at your podcast and go, "Geez, he's a horrible person. He never told his family." But until you're in that position, you don't know what you would do. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very easy for others to pass their opinion when they're not inside your own head looking out. And that's unfortunately the way society is sometimes, where people seem to think that they have the right to have an opinion on you when nobody has a right to have an opinion on you other than you. And like I've said it before, and I'm going to probably keep saying it throughout, it's an incredible credit to you and the strength of character and the mindset that you're in right now, that you're able to to share that story and be as open as what you are being. Because, as you said, if you had a sat, say, maybe 3 or 4 years ago and tried to articulate your feelings, tried to talk about this story right now and force it out when you weren't quite ready, that could have had even more negative consequences. But now you're kind of at ease with it, and now you feel like you can actually open up and speak about that moment in your life because you've thought about it that much, and you're now ready to articulate how you felt. But you see, we talk quite a bit about sort of life experiences that are impactful to us, that mean something to us. There are moments where we realize what we have or what we don't have. You've had, and I think it's quite safe to say, you've got quite a lot over the last number of years that has potentially led you astray through a negative mindset and other things. You've obviously lost your father a number of years back, and I'm sure that can't have been easy when you were going through what you had went through previously.
So 2013, depression was the worst ever. I remember, Gary, 2013, May 2013, it came to a point where I just poured all the alcohol down the sink. It was a big, and that's shame to say, I was a big, heavy guy. The doctor had offered antidepressants. I said no because I've seen people on antidepressants and they get hooked on it, and it becomes that they have to have it. It controls their life. I didn't want that. I was offered counselling in 2013, but I was told it could take up to 6 months. And I said, you know what? Only person that's ever going to change my life is me. As silly as it sounds, I went and bought a wee exercise bike, put it in my apartment, cycled maybe 15 minutes at the start. It was hard. Got to the point, Corey, where I was cycling for 2 hours a day, cycling miles upon miles. I was losing all the weight. The weight was coming off, and it was amazing. I never drunk alcohol. I never took a takeaway. I ate clean for about 8 months. And I remember one day getting to put a pair of jeans on, and it just like just fell down. I was like, wow. And I went out near Christmas that year with one of my old mates. And I was just out. I was really nervous going out because I hadn't been out in 8 months. And I went out and people were coming up to me going, wow, you've lost so much weight. And it's nice when people say stuff like that. I mean, at the end of the day, guy, I didn't do the exercising to lose weight. A friend of mine told me that when you do exercise, there's endorphins in your brain that's good for the brain. So I thought, well, I'm depressed. Maybe doing this will make me not depressed. So when I did it, and you were finishing your exercise and you were feeling great, I couldn't explain these feelings in my head. It wasn't even the weight coming off. It was just these feelings in my head. I feel great. I'm on top of the world, feel great. That got me through for a few years, right up until about 2016. I was just being healthy and exercise. And yes, also after the 8 months when I went back out drinking, I did go out more often then because your confidence is up and you're right around your old friends. But I didn't let drink get a hold of me. I always kept the exercise. 2015, I think it was January 2015, my dad got diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Now, I'd never heard of Alzheimer's. I didn't know what it was. So I did a lot of research on it, and more or less it told me that there was no cure. Like when you hear of maybe people having cancer or whatever, there's a chance that they're going to die. I heard the word Alzheimer's and I thought, it's probably just like, when you have a heart problem or something. I didn't know that this was something that would kill you. And then around 2016, my dad just forgot who I was. He didn't know me anymore. And that's when I felt down. And I think that's when the depression came back in big time.
I don't know if there's anybody listening who has experienced any family members with Alzheimer's. My granddad was in a very similar situation before he passed. He had liver cancer, but he also had Alzheimer's, so he had no idea how ill he was. And as you were saying, Chrissy, like your dad didn't know who you were. My granddad hadn't a clue who we were. But the funny thing was, and I don't know if it's the same about you, but granddad, he wouldn't be able to tell you what time it was, what day of the week it was, But there was one picture he used to sit in his mental piece, and it used to be where he lived. Do you know where Poundland, or not Poundland, Pound Stretchers is in Coleraine now? There used to be like a pond there, and he lived in a house across, not a pond, like a rivery thing, and he lived across the road from it, and that picture was in his mental piece. And as soon as you brought that down to him and you put it in front of him, he would talk for hours. He remembered everything, but he couldn't remember what he'd done 2 seconds ago. Like, it's such a horrible, horrible disease.
I did a lot of research into it only because I'd never heard of it. And I mean a lot of research, because at the end of the day, he was never going to get better. We he had Alzheimer's, but it was also known as vascular dementia. So what my dad had was a sped up version of Alzheimer's. So most people live between 10 and 15 years with Alzheimer's. My dad only lived for 5 years, so he had a very fast version of it. So obviously, as a family, I mean, we never put him in a home. We wouldn't do that. We kept him at home the whole time he had it. He passed away at home. We just, we're that close as a family. I just couldn't picture the poor man being at home and not know what was going on. So that's why we put so much research on it as a family. I mean, it tells you that with Alzheimer's that they can't remember yesterday, but they'll remember 30 years ago. And my dad used to always say to me, go out there, and he used to say to me, go out there and look after them cows and them sheep. And I says, what are you on about? And he goes, this is my farm. My dad grew up on a farm as a wee boy. So he thought I was one of the next door neighbour's farmer's sons, and he used to say to me, go out there and look after my sheep and stuff. But see, if you were to say to him, what did you do today, or what did you do last week? Didn't have a clue, mate.
That's It's funny you say that about when they get back to when they're, or when they think back to when they're younger, because my granddad grew up in the Cavalian, and that's where my dad was born, and that's where they lived and stuff. And when he died in Windsor Avenue. He'd been in Windsor Avenue for a lot of years, like all my childhood he was there, and I'm 33. And he used to always say, no, he was at home at this stage, but he used to always say, when am I going home? When are you taking me home? And you say, Grandad, you are home. This isn't home to me. And he'd lived there for 35, 40 years, because home to him was the Cavalian, and he could still remember home. It's funny. It's really funny how that works.
My dad, my dad had a brother called Barney. Barney passed away when he was like 17. And near the end, when my dad was passing away, every time I used to come in, he used to go to me, Barney, Barney, all right, Barney. So in the end, he thought I was, obviously I was his son, but he thought I was his brother, Barney. He thought my other brother was his other brother. And he thought that my mum was his mum.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just a horrible thing to watch. I mean, I remember, Gary, a funny wee story. My dad was a massive Only Fools and Horses fan, massive. So the greatest scene ever is when Del Boy falls through the bar. So I remember Christmas 2015. He only really had the Alzheimer's, and he watched it and he laughed and he said, I love this program. It's my greatest program ever. Christmas 2016 came around. Same episode was on. Didn't know what the program was. Could never remember that you ever enjoyed it. Didn't know what we were talking about. Nothing. Just shows you how quick it happens, mate. Just and that's where my depression kicked in again, mate. When you know what? Then I was 30, same age as you are now. I was 33. Back in 2016, I was what, 33, 34, around that. A man I'd known all my life, who knew me all my life, who, if anyone ever tells you about my dad, they'll say two things. He was a gentleman and he was funny. He loved to tell a joke, mate. He went from being the funniest man I ever met to just like a stranger. Like I was a stranger to him, and I mean, just anything. I remember shaving him one day. I was shaving him and I shaved one half of him, and I was coming around past his eye line. And I got past his eye line. He goes, "Hey boy, who are you? Get away from me! Stop trying to cut me with that razor." And all. It was just that's just hard to take. I mean, Alzheimer's is horrible, and I wouldn't want anyone ever to go through.
No.
I know people can say, well, cancer's horrible. They're all horrible. But the horrible thing about this is I wouldn't want anyone out there to know their mum or their dad and have amazing relationship, and then one day them just go, I genuinely don't know who you are. And they're not acting, they don't know who you are.
Yeah, it's no, it's an absolutely horrible thing to see and to experience. I actually, just it's funny you said there about shaving him, and then you got to that point where he sort of said, "Who are you?" I, for me, with my granddad, it never got to that point. He didn't really know who we were, but he knew that we were family, if that makes sense. So he didn't know that we were strangers. We just didn't know which one was which. And I remember, I'm not too sure about you, Chrissy, but I remember when I knew things were getting bad with my granddad. So I spent a lot more time with him. And it's when I spent that time with him, I looked him in the eye. It was a few times where he was just sitting staring into the abyss, and I would pull the seat up to our side and just sort of look at him. He never lost a sparkle in his eye. Like it was like looking at Granda whenever I was 12, 13, like how I remember him. Like it was a really weird sensation, really weird feeling that here he was deteriorating with liver cancer and Alzheimer's, but yet that sparkle in his eye was still there. I could still tell it was him underneath everything that was going on, underneath everything that he couldn't remember and what was savage in his body inside. He was still there. I could still see it, and it's that was the hardest thing for me.
It's hard too, Gary, because I could see it in my dad. He was the same person, but he wasn't the same person. And if it's harder for the people around him, like as much as he's lost his complete memory of who we are, and it must have been very scary for him not to know who we were. He must have been scared every day. To him, we were strangers. But it's harder for us because we know who he is, and as you say, you see it in their eye, and you know it's them. And like he would still try and be funny. I remember him saying one time that. So what happened to him was, Gary, 2016, he got his car took off him. He'd been driving all his life, but obviously they took off him for his own benefit. You can't drive if you can't remember. And I came in one night, and he says to me, "Hey boy," he didn't know who I was. He goes, "Hey you boy, come here." And he had his wee hospital bed in the home in our house. We got him all because we don't want to go in the home, so he had his own wee hospital bed and all in the bedroom and all. So I go in and I'd walk by to go to the toilet, and he'd shuffle down to the end of the bed and he'd go, hey you, come here. Something to tell you. So I go in, sit beside him, and I go, "All right, Dad," and all. And he just go, "Don't know who you are, but I have a funny story for you." And I said, "Right." He goes, "Do you see my car out there in the garden?" His car was gone. His car wasn't there anymore. And I says, "Oh, guy, I see your car." So the three boys come around here last night. He says, to try to steal my car. He says, "I got my shotgun out and shot one of them in the arse." He says, "That's take my car." He says, and that's the way he was. He would tell funny stuff like that there, and then he would stare into the abyss for about an hour and say no. But he still had the humour.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was scary and horrible and hurtful because one minute he had the humour, and then the next minute he just was different. He just didn't do it
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah, that's funny you should say that about the driving, because we actually had to end up hiding my granddad's keys because as much as he didn't know who he was or who we were, he still remembered his way around Coleraine. Like I remember my dad getting a phone call um, from somebody else saying, "We've just seen your dad downtown. I thought he was supposed to be in the house," because he would just steal the car keys and he would go, and then it ended up being these scratches and bumps in the car, but nobody knew where they came from because he was, in his jolly way, just making his way around Coleraine. And that's the part that makes me. I smiled when you said that about your dad in the car because it just brought back that memory of my granddad. And that's as dangerous as it is to know that he was driving around Coleraine in that state. It is quite funny to notice that that he still had the desire to drive, which I suppose is kind of comfort in a way to know that he still thought that he had some kind of worth and some kind of purpose on whilst he was here. But that, everything that you'd experienced previous to that, and then obviously what happened to your father and obviously him passing away. After that had happened, did did your depression come back, or were you able to sort of fight it and keep it at bay?
I didn't grieve for a year. I'll tell you. I've only told a few people. I'll tell you an very in detailed story. And it's a very private story because it was the day of my dad's funeral. But I don't mind telling you in the podcast at all because in the day I'm at a stronger place now. I remember standing over my dad's coffin. We had the funeral in the home in our house, and everyone's crying, mate. Everyone's crying. And I looked at my uncle Ronnie. My uncle Ronnie is one of the strongest men I ever seen. In all his brothers' funerals, he never cried, and he was crying. Not a tear did I have, Corey. I couldn't force it out of myself. If I'd have pinched myself, I was like a sponge. It was dry. There was no tears. And I loved this man all my life. I'll backtrack a wee bit, Tori. The night my dad passed away at home, my mum said to me, go in and sit with him, see how he is. He hadn't ate in 10 days. So I don't know if anyone out there knows, you might know yourself, Corey, how people die with Alzheimer's is that they starve. They can't swallow. So they don't eat for 10, 12 days and then they die because they haven't ate. So my dad lost the ability to swallow. He didn't know how to eat. So he starved for 10 days. There's nothing we could do. We feed him morphine. And then on the 10th of, it's coming up, his 4-year anniversary is coming up next Wednesday. So on the 10th of February 2017, I went in and I remember putting my left hand on his right hand, or sorry, my left hand on his left hand. And he was warm. He was warm. It was, but his head was to the side, his eyes were closed, and he wasn't breathing really. All you could hear was like, he was doing that for 10 days. Now, Garia, years ago, maybe when I ran around the church and stuff in Ballysally, I was religious, but at this stage, I was not a religious person. All I said was, God, if you've any mercy, will you just take him now? Said it. Didn't expect anything to happen. Just said it. My dad had his head to the side. My dad turned around and he looked at me and he just passed away right in front of me as I held his hand. I got up, put my hand behind my head, shocked, all different feelings. My mum ran in. He had one of them hospital beds, so we lowered the bed down, opened the window, all that spiritual stuff people do, and then he took his last breath. And I was like, wow. So I said a prayer to God. He'd suffered for 10 days. People may think I'm crazy, probably think, that's loaded lies. It's the truth. Held his hand, mate, and said, God, if you've any mercy, take him now. And he died in front of me, right there and then. I don't know then, during his funeral, if I was in shock. But for a year, I never cried once. Everyone cried. I never cried. The depression maybe did come back straight away, but I didn't grieve until possibly summertime 2018.
I think that's. Sorry, I mean cut off there. Off you go.
Sorry, mate, I didn't mean to cut you off. I know people who told me stories that it took them a year to cry. I mean, I remember being in the shower, mate, no feelings at all. Sat down in the shower, bawled me eyes out like a child.
Yeah, I've spoken to Darren to Darren Wallace about this as well. We had an episode about grief that we recorded, and we were just talking about our own experiences and stuff. And the same thing happened to me with my granddad. I was talking about there in his funeral. Didn't shed a tear. I spoke at his funeral, carried the coffin, done everything else. And I was driving. I was working for the IFA, and I was driving out to like a wee remote school outside Lisburn. And exactly like you just said, you were in the shower. I pulled over the side of the road, and I can't remember what time it was. I couldn't tell you what day it was, what month it was, what was on the radio, and nothing like that. It just came out, just completely by myself in the car. Everything came out, and about maybe 10, 15 minutes later, I went into the school and done the session and everything else. Came back home, and it was almost like nothing had happened, but something had happened. You know what I mean? It was a really, really weird sensation for me. But that was the same as me. Like I didn't want to force the grief. I didn't want to sort of put on that I was grieving when I really wasn't. And I suppose from your perspective, when you have, yours is a lot different than my experience because yours is your father, mine is my grandfather for a start, and that's a lot closer to home. But did you feel like there was a pressure on you, to grieve a certain way to show that you were grieving when you weren't actually ready to grieve?
Well, first and foremost, you say it was your granddad. I think a loss is a loss. So he was close to you, Gary. So it's still close. Doesn't matter if it's your granddad or your dad. It's still a loss. So I know where you were coming from. It was hurting. I felt there was pressure. I felt at my dad's funeral, people were looking at me going, "Why is he not crying? I mean, does he not care?" And it probably came across to a lot of people like, one, he's either being really strong, or two, maybe he wasn't that close to his dad, maybe he didn't care. To me, it was so weird. I was like, I love this man so much. I mean, I held his hand when he passed away in front of me, and I loved him so much, and I miss him every day now still. But I mean, people say it's hard to get water out of a stone. I felt like a stone, and nothing was coming out. I couldn't understand it. I was confused. I was like, so my father's died. Most people's fathers die, they're bawling their eyes out. Like my big brother cried like a child. My sister, older, I'm the youngest. They're older than me. They both cried for months. And I remember being, before I met my wife, I remember saying, 2017, right, a wee bit down, a bit depressed. I'm not grieving. I'm not going to meet anyone because it's not fair for the next girl to come along in case I ever break down in the future, then she has to deal with it. Lo and behold, I met Kira, and it's great meeting Kira. Met Kira was brilliant, and maybe that was maybe another reason I didn't grieve so early, Gary. Maybe meeting somebody, and she's an amazing person, she's always amazing, and she's a wee rock to me. But maybe meeting her at that time distracted me from what happened, and our life was great, and we got engaged, and everything was amazing. And I decided, no, I'm going to move to Belfast, because one of the reasons I think I moved to Belfast was there was so much hurt where I was. I mean, living in the Port Stewart was, I tried suicide, I was depressed, I cut myself off from a lot of my friends because, I mean, it wasn't their fault. A lot of my friends like to go out and drink, but they could go out and drink and stop. I went out and drank and it turned into depression. It wasn't their fault. Cut myself off from a lot of friends. Then my dad passed away, and I just had a lot of bad memories of where I was. So I moved away. But maybe meeting her, maybe meeting Kira, maybe that maybe give me a bit of happiness and a bit of joy. And then the grief wasn't there. But like you say, you pulled up at the side of the road that day and you cried. I had the same experience as you had. I cried in the shower for 10 minutes. I got out of the shower, got changed, and sat down or wherever, did went for a walk, like I hadn't cried.
Yeah.
Like I knew I'd cried and I knew all that emotion come out. But at the same time, 10 minutes later, I was like, did that really happen? Did I really cry there? I mean, how was I able to get on with the rest of my day like nothing happened? It was so strange, mate.
Yeah, that's. I'm happy you said that because I don't think I've ever explained that to anyone who's actually understood it. But you have, it is such a, something has happened in that moment, but you don't know something's happened in that moment because you look back and you go, did that actually happen? That's what I had, and that's obviously what you had at the moment as well. So, you've met Kira. Was it through a mutual friend, I believe, that you met Kira? Yes.
Yes. So the way Portshire Arms are top house.
I do.
Started getting in there with a friend. I started getting in there with a.
You get a good pint of Guinness in there as well.
Best Guinness in the town, mate.
So, absolutely.
Sorry for cutting you off there, Gary.
You're all right.
Mate, went in there with a friend. I don't know if you would know him, a guy called Mark Higgerty. Went in there with Mark and a wee guy called David McMullen, DD, so they're Man United fans. I was a Chelsea fan. Went in there. This was the game that we tanked United 4-0 at the bridge. Sorry, but we did. Me being me, Mr. Chatty, I sat down in this chair, and this guy came along and he's like, "Excuse me, mate, you're sitting in my seat." And I was like, being from Korea, and I was like, "Oh, good one, mate, dead on." He's like, "No, you're actually sitting in my chair." And I was like, "Oh, dead on, mate, whatever." Anyway, I moved, I sat down, and Chelsea scored straight away. I was up and all, and slabbering and all myself. Fully United fans. Wee boy beside me, his name's Roger. We call him the Dodge. He shook my hand, fair play to end the game. He goes, "Mate, all these United fans and you're giving us lip and all." Then I started getting in and kept meeting your man Roger. Then I got to meet his mate called Daisy. Daisy was going with a girl from Belfast. That's how I got to meet Kira. Long story, as we say down our way, long story short.
So the Portshire Arms is the new romantic mecca of Port Stewart.
That's the dating hub of Port Stewart.
Telling you, but some good nights in that place is pretty decent. So, but from there, then obviously you've moved to Belfast. But I think the most striking thing about your story Chrissy, is that you weren't too long settled in Belfast when more bad news hit you, unfortunately.
It did. This was the polar opposite of what happened to my dad. So when my dad died, the grief was, as I said, took a year. This was instant grief. This was just like my heart broken in pieces. So for anyone out there who probably knows the story, Big Willie Collins, a lot of people would know Willie from Ballysally and from the church. He did a lot of work in the youth group and stuff. He also worked in Eason's there in Korean as well. Um, where I grew up in Ballysally, I lived two doors away from Willie. So Willie's mum was like my mum, and my mum was like his mum. So he passed away at the age of 34. I lived beside him for 30 years. So when people say, sorry, I hear about your friend passing, I would normally say, like a brother. He was at our wedding in September 2019 in Portstewart. I remember going out and the guy, the photographer goes, here's one of your closest friends. And I says, friend, this is like a brother. And we took a picture. It's very sad that that was the last picture we ever took together. On, in November 2019, I think it was the 17th of November, it was a Sunday morning. I woke up to a Facebook message to say, did you hear about Willie passed away? And it was one of those ones where you look at it and went, it was when you're half asleep. I mean, I must have got this message at 7 in the morning, but I, being lazy on a Sunday, I didn't wake up to about 9:30. My wife was already downstairs and I'm looking at my phone going, is this a dream? I mean, because I just spoke to him a couple of nights ago on Facebook, right? So Big Willie would have had like, Willie was epileptic, but he would take a fit now and again, but he did have medication. And when I last spoke to him, he was saying to me he was fine, it was all under control. Um, Apparently, what happened was on the Saturday night, his mum was telling me, I don't think his mum will mind me telling the story. He came downstairs, all right, mum, are you okay? Yes, I'm okay. Yes, I'm just down getting some food. He went back up the stairs, and she said within 10 minutes she heard him taking a bit of a fit or something. It was something sounded like that. She said the time she got to the top of the stairs, he died. But when I got that message, my whole world just fell apart. I was just getting over my dad and the grief after my dad. And I'm not ashamed to say it, I came downstairs and cried like a child. Cried and cried and cried. And I was panicking. I said to my wife, Kira, please tell me that does not say what I think it says in that phone. And she read it. No, the big man died 2019, 16th of November 2019, and it just ruined me. And it's been till I did counselling, it's been so hard since.
Yeah, I can only imagine what that must feel like when when someone so close to you passes like that. Particularly because, as you say, it's somebody who's been in your life as a brother, really, rather than a friend. He's been a brother. You lived with him, and you've seen each other's mums as mums, which I don't think you take. I think you take for granted at the time, don't you? You don't. It's not only when you look back at your friends and you go, well, actually, those were actually some of the best times of my life when I was running out in and out of his house. He was in and out of my house, and I was staying at his, and he was staying at mine. That kind of way. That friendship, I think, is very special when you're younger, and you don't really appreciate it until you're older. And unfortunately, when you find yourself in situations like you find yourself in at that time, I suppose you probably do a lot more thinking and recalling of those good times because of such a sad circumstance that you find yourself in. And at that stage, then, Chrissy, I mean, we spoke about it being a constant thread, but when your dad passed and when that sort of period had settled down a wee bit for you, and then with Willie's passing, do you think that accelerated your depression to the point where you needed to get help and you seeked it yourself and you thought, I need to do something about this?
I think that I'll always be honest and say this. I think if I didn't have Kira in my life, there would have been a massive possibility I would have tried to commit suicide a second time because the two people that was so funny and two people I loved massively. I mean, I have my own brothers and stuff and sisters, and I love them, and I do have other friends. But do you know the thing I miss the most about Willie, apart from in all the fun times, Gary, is yes, I have my wife here, and when you have your partner, you don't really want to open up to them about how you're feeling because you don't want to hurt them and stuff. Wally was class in the way that, see if I was suffering, I could have messaged him and says, I'm having a bad day, mate. And he knew what to say, and I was fine. But that was gone. It wasn't there anymore. I didn't have that. And that probably is, people probably go, oh, so you only miss your best friend because he helped you. I miss him for millions of different reasons. I miss him because he's not here and I don't have a laugh with him. I would just love to give him a hug and tell him I love him, and I miss all that. But it was the same for him. He could have reached out to me anytime he wanted. When he had a hard life, he lost his sister when she was very young and he was very young, and I was always there for him. Um, and ironically and horribly as it is, he passed away on the day before his sister's anniversary of her death. So his mum's went through a lot too. But when he lost his sister, I remember the day he lost the night he lost his sister. I went up to his house and he was in his sister's room and he was crying, and I gave him a hug. And anytime he ever wanted to talk about his sister, he messaged me. Anytime I wanted to talk about anything that hurt me, I messaged him. But that community, that's gone. It's not. I wasn't there. And as horrible as I say this, if I didn't have Kira, I would have committed suicide or tried to do it again, because I would have got to the point where I would have been wouldn't have had a partner. I would have been on my own. I would have cut myself off from everybody again, Gary. I wouldn't have went to my family because I know my mum was still going through the grieving of my dad.
Yeah.
I would have probably have. I know hindsight's a fine thing, and people might say, "Well, how do you know you would have?" I just know I would have. I just know I would have got so depressed that I would have got drunk some night and tried it again, even though I knew in my head that the guilt and all the horrible stuff and all of that. The first time I done it, I said to myself I would never do it again. I probably would have been quite close to doing it again if I didn't have my family and Kira and her family and all, because I mean, no human being can handle losing two people really close to them who suffered depression all their life. So I'm quite thankful that I had the people around me, because I probably wouldn't be where I am now. I probably wouldn't be strong.
Yeah. Yeah. And you, what you've came through, and to the point where you actually decided to seek that counselling, that must have been, I mean, the decision first and foremost to seek counselling. I know we had spoke about it very briefly, but you'd mentioned that when you got the phone call, it was on the tip of your tongue to say, "No, I'm okay."
Yeah,
the strength for you to actually swallow that pride and say, "No, I actually am not okay. I need to speak to somebody." I mean, that's a big step in itself.
you back, right?
Here we are. We're back again.
Lost you there, mate. I was chatting away. I was going to tell you more stories. I'm glad you're back. Well,
No, good.
If you want to carry on there, you were saying about
Yeah, and just as I was saying, like from because we had spoke obviously previous about that time where that you got that phone call about are you still interested in counselling, and you said it was on the tip of your tongue to say no, I'm okay. I mean, that was a big level of self-awareness to be able to say, I'm actually not okay, I need help.
I think I was trying to kid myself, where you're like, I'm all right, but I'm not all right. So what kind of happened was 2020, start of the year, I emailed him because I couldn't get through on the phone. And I read this, I wasn't ashamed to say it, I read this big message in an email. I'm making my family unhappy, I'm making my friends unhappy, I'm making my wife unhappy. It's causing a lot of problems in our relationship, because I was at that point, Gary, where I hated the world. I hated everything. I was a very angry person. Now, I would have never have been violent or anything like that. I just got to that point, Gary, where I was like, well, it's not fair. Why do I have to lose Big Wally and my dad? Why do I have to do that? There's people out there worse than me, and I don't mean that there's people out there worse than me, it should happen to them. But when you're angry, you go, there's people out there who do worse things than me. I'm not a bad person. I mean, I've done my mistakes in my life and made my faults, but why is this happening to me? So my whole thing was, I hate this world. I hate everything in this world. I tell you what, my anger was on a scale of like 100, not 10, 100. And the girl was ringing, and I wasn't even going to answer the phone. But I read this email anyway, and I told them, look, I need counselling. Please give me counselling. 6 months went by before I got a call. excuse me, and I was trying to kid myself in those 6 months that it was okay, but I wasn't. I was still the same angry, still the same pissed off, still hated life as much. And when the call came, I was going to pick up the phone and go, "Thank you very much for getting back to me. I know with COVID and stuff, it takes so long, but you know what? I sorted my life out. All the best, goodbye." But I knew I was kidding myself. So I was going to tell him, no, I didn't need counselling. And you know what? I'm actually glad I didn't, because it was the best thing I ever done.
How did you find the counselling process? Did you find that you were reliving past experiences, or was it more like you felt a freedom then after you had articulated how you felt?
Counselling was strange because it was over the phone.
Okay.
Most people do counselling, obviously, you can go see someone, but over the phone, it was a bit strange because of COVID. The first session was hard. It didn't really open up because I still think when I was doing the first session, in my head, I was lying to myself. I was like, I might just hang up this call here, cheekily. I hang up this call. I'm not a cheeky person, but hang up this call. I don't need counselling. But I'd done it. Um, I came away from it and I kind of thought, right, this girl that's doing the counselling with me, she's taking an hour of her time every week, every Thursday. I need to be respectful and give her a chance. So each week, Gary, it was like reliving the past. So my counselling with her was known as grief counselling. And she was explaining to me how some people are delayed grief and how other moments. So with my dad, it was delayed, but with Wally, it was instant. And what I came to establish was, because my dad had Alzheimer's, I knew he was going to die. So maybe that's why I didn't grieve. Whereas when it's Big Wally, you're talking to him on a Saturday or a Thursday night through text message, or Friday night, "What's the crack, mate? How's everything's fine?" Then 48 hours, he's dead. That's a massive shock. So she said grief hits people in different ways, and she said the reason I hated the word was that was my mechanism because I couldn't cope with what happened to me, and that's why I had so much hate and anger. Um, and they do this like score sheet on the so when I was emailing them, it was like out of 1 to 10, how do you feel about this, this, and this? And the higher the score you are, the worse you are. So my score was 22 out of 30. So I obviously really needed counselling. And then with my last session last week, my score was 1 out of 30. So it shows you the difference. I was 22, really needed counselling, and now I'm 1. So
And your decision to share your story, did it did it come towards the end of that counselling process, or was that something that you kind of had in mind when you went into it? So, I want to get to the point where I can share it. How did that sort of come about?
went into counselling, had no expectations of sharing my story. Just went into counselling, just not even to help myself, just to see where it went.
Mm.
And each week, I found myself realizing why I hated things and why I was so angry. And I remember in the middle of counselling a couple of weeks in, I was like, I mean, I always believe, Gary, that when you're born, your life's already planned out for you. Some people don't. Some people believe it's about choices. We make the choices. But then I always say, well, if you make the choices, would you choose to have Alzheimer's? Would you choose to die at 34 years old? You wouldn't. You wouldn't do that. But that was your life. And I always used to believe that. So that's why when I was always positive, I always believed, well, sure, my life's already planned out for me. There's no point in me panicking and worrying about things that's going to happen, because if they happen, I can't control it. But then when I lost my dad and I lost Wally and I got really depressed, in that depression, I was like, I need to control everything. And when COVID hit and I was really, the anxiety was through the roof, I was going to my wife, I'm not going outside. I never went outside. I barely went into the garden. I'm not going outside. I'm not going to the shop. I'm not going here. Anxiety just took over. I was like, I need to control everything in my life because I don't want to get COVID. Because, I mean, some people get COVID and it's bad and some people don't. I'm asthmatic. If I get COVID, it could be really bad. So at the start, anxiety was through the roof, start of 2020, and I was just like, I need to control all this. Then that started seeping into my life. So if something bad happened, I was like, why didn't I control that? I could have stopped that happening. And you're panicking. But I learned halfway through counselling that if something bad's going to happen tomorrow in my life, I can't control that.
Mhm.
And it started giving me this confidence and this strength where I went from panic mode, I should have controlled that. That was my decision. That shouldn't happen, to now I'm at halfway through counselling and I'm at, there's nothing I can do is going to stop anything that's ever going to happen to me. Nothing that can stop. Anything bad is ever going to happen to me. There's nothing I can do to stop it. Nothing. And I just started to grow in confidence. Um, when your counsellor's shown you this is why you're thinking this, this is why you're thinking that. We didn't just talk about grief. We talked about many things. I mean, me and my brother are just above me. He's a couple of years above me. I have a lot of guilt because we were never really close. I mean, maybe I was closer to Big Wally than I am to him. He's 5 years older than me. We're just different people. We don't have the same interests. I mean, might shock a lot of people. A lot of people know my big brother's called Andy, and he's a good fella. Like, but we were just he was just older than me, and there was no closeness there, you know. And I talked about stuff like that in counselling, how you felt guilty about how I should be closer to my brother. Um, I don't know if a lot of people know out there. I have a bigger brother. He hasn't spoken to the family in years, personal reasons. He hasn't spoken to me in 10, 15 years. I mean, there's guilt there. Maybe I could have did more. Maybe he could have did more. So it wasn't always just about grief. I could talk about anything to this girl. It was grief counselling, but I could talk about anything. And the more I talked about stuff, the more positive I got. I came out of finished counselling, Gary, and I got to the point where I was like, you know what? I've just did counselling. I was never even going to do it to begin with. You know, I told you I wasn't even going to do it, and I've done it. Now it's time to help other people. And I've always loved helping people, and I've always wanted. I mean, I do. I mean, if I could do any job, even if it's voluntarily, I'd love to be like a social work, like a youth and like a youth worker in the sense that you're out in the streets helping the homeless or helping people with mental problems. So I don't even have to get paid for it, mate. Just want to do it. I thought I'll reach out to Gary. I know Gary does podcasts. I don't know if Gary does podcasts on mental health. If you had told me no, then no. I'm just very thankful that you said you do it. And I thought, I know Gary all my life and I trust him. I mean, this story is going to be, a lot of people aren't going to know how. I know a lot about my life than they do now, but I don't really care if a lot of people watch this, out of nosiness they want to know about my life. If this helps one person,
Yeah.
that's it. And that's the story, Gary. I came out of counselling and I was so inspired to help other people.
Yeah, it's a massive change from where you were, 7, 8 years ago, and it shows the power of you feeling confident enough to speak to somebody who essentially was there to listen rather than talk, because I'm sure that's what your counsellor was allowing you to do, was just allowing you to lay it all out in the line, maybe asking probing questions just to try and dig a little bit deeper, but essentially your ability to speak was all based on you, because you spoke there about the control. You spoke about the idea that things that were outside of your control might have caused you some anxiety, like the COVID situation. But now you're in a point in your life, you're saying, well, you know what? I really can't control what happens to the externals, what happens around me, how people perceive me, how the weather is, for example, how if someone's bad, rude to me, or whatever else. All I can do is control my response. And that's an incredibly strong mental state to be in. I mean,
and that happened over 12 weeks, mate. So 12 weeks ago when I was starting counselling, I was still at a stage of anger and hating the world. And why is this happening to me? And why is that happening? That shouldn't be happening to me. I should be able to control that. And your head's all over the place. 12 weeks later, you're like, wow, I'm at a point now where I want to tell people my life story. And 12 weeks ago, I would have never been at this point. I would have never told anyone any of my business. Very, very private person. But I mean, I don't care who watches this and knows my business. At the end of the day, that's not what this podcast is about. For me, this podcast is about, there is people out there who know they need counselling and won't speak out. There's also people out there who might be lonely and don't have anyone. Speak out. Ring one of those charities or reach out to a friend and say, hey, look, I'm struggling here. I think the thing is, Corey, a lot of people are scared to speak out because they think their friends will take the piss. I mean, I remember years ago, back in 2013, I was depressed, and what my friend said to me, "Wise up, mate. Just shake it off. Just wise up and get on with your life." And I turned around and I says, "Do you think I wake up every day wanting to be depressed? It's not a choice. I don't choose every day to feel like I hate my life. It's an illness. But back then, 2013, people just thought attention seeker. Oh,
Yeah.
he just doing this for attention. I felt like saying if I was doing this for attention, I think I would be doing something else rather than waking up every day wanting to end my life.
Mm.
So I think there's going to be a lot of people out there who are scared to speak out because they think their friends will take the piss. Well, at the end of the day, what I say to you is if your friends take the piss, they're not really your friends. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, if you speak out and your friend takes a piss, is he really a friend? But if you speak out and your friend's there for you, see when you speak out during mental health, see who's ever there for you. That's the people that love you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it'll be hard. There'll be people out there watch my video and go, well, that's easy for you. They say you went through counselling and now you're positive. Well, my story to you is to do counselling. It's the best thing I ever done. Don't do antidepressants. It's not going to work. Go get someone professional who's professional there to do it. Don't, yes, speak out and ask your friends or your family for help, but I wouldn't say constantly badger them. Speak out, and if they tell you to get counselling, because what can happen there is your friends and family can get emotionally attached. So when they see you hurting, they're hurting, and they're not able to give you the best advice. So counselling is the best for your mind to get help. But what I'll always say is, it might sound I'm contradicting myself, is please just ask for help. I wish back in 2013 I asked for help because I tell you what, I am very lucky to be here. If my housemate hadn't found me, I would. The doctor told me I wouldn't be here.
Mhm.
I just think I wouldn't be married and I wouldn't be happy. You know, I wouldn't have the life I have now. I'm not saying I have the most glamorous life, but
Mhm.
I'm alive. And do you know what now, Gary? It's so weird after counselling. I now want to live my life. I want to be alive and I want to live for the next 30, 40 years and be happy. Whereas most of my life I couldn't care if I lived or died.
Mhm. And that is the power of speaking out. And that is, I mean, I often think, it's difficult for people like me, for example, to sit here and say that you have to speak out, right? And you have to go and seek help and you have to do this and that when I haven't experienced it. But the difference is when someone like yourself who is as open and candid about their story says it and means it, and it's not just attention seeking, as you said. Some people might perceive that, but that's their opinion. That doesn't bother you, doesn't bother me. And there's more power when people like yourself who've lived through it, who have gone to some really, really dark places, but are now in a place where they can appreciate life and they can appreciate everything they went through, and they can look back on it and say, you know what, I'm not going to ignore it. It's part of my story, and I have to tell it. And just to round us off in the podcast, I I can't thank you enough for being open and honest and wanting to use this podcast as a platform to get your story out there, because I just know heart of hearts there's so many other people out there that need to hear this kind of thing. And when it comes from someone like you who's lived through it, it means a hell of a lot more.
Just in closing, just to show people how strong and how good counselling's helped. The last wee story is me and my wife, we lost a wee baby. So we got pregnant there and we were running around at Christmas time telling everyone we were pregnant. We were overjoyed. It's not another sad story, it's just that we like to be honest. We lost a wee baby in 8 weeks. But just to show you how strong I am, I've been there for her and I've been strong for her. I've been supporting her. I'm crying on the inside. I haven't cried on the outside. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm grieving. But that's 3 losses in my life, and I'm still standing. I'm still sitting here telling my story and telling people life does get better.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I lost that wee baby 4 or 5 weeks ago, and it does hurt. But I'm so strong for my wife, and I'm so strong for her, and I'm so strong that I'm able. I mean, I never thought in my life I could come on a podcast and tell people about my life. And thank you, Gary, for letting me come on. I mean, if I can take anything away from this, some people will watch this and it could be gossip city. Let's gossip about so and so's life. I don't care what you do. I don't care what you say about my life. I'm on Gary's podcast, and I hope one person out there this helps. And that's all I did it for.
Yeah, and that's it's a very powerful position to be in as well, to be able to have, like I've said plenty of times so far, to have that belief in yourself to come out there, and particularly what you went through recently, and have the strength of character and strength of mind to be able to navigate that through together, when for so long you've been the person relying on somebody else being strong, and now you're the person being strong. And I think that's just I mean, it's a magical part of your story that's so powerful. So, Chrissy, if anybody out there is, thinking about counselling and stuff, what counselling service did you use? Did you go through public health, or was it something private you sought, or?
I went through a company called Cruise Bereavement in Belfast. It's a public one, so you can ring them. But when I rang them, obviously it was COVID, so there was no one there. So they did have an email service. So I went through them publicly. I recently went to the doctor, and he told me to contact them. So I contacted Cruise Bereavement in Belfast. They're absolutely fantastic company. What they do is they ring you up on a regular basis every week. They listen to your life. They give you the best advice. And then what they're doing at the moment, Gary, is they're leaving me alone now for 6 weeks. And then what they'll do in 6 weeks' time, they'll call me back. Now, in 6 weeks' time, if I'm in a bad place, they'll pick up counselling for another 3 or 4 weeks. Or if I'm in a good place, they'll ring me back and they'll say, thanks for all the best and everything. So definitely, if you're suffering and you don't want to go to a friend or whatever, pick up the phone, ring the doctor, tell the doctor, look, I'm depressed. He might offer you antidepressants. I didn't take antidepressants because I don't think they help. I think it's just a way of shove you out the door. It's not going to help you. I mean, taking a tablet or talking to someone, I'd rather talk to someone. Yeah. Yes, it could be a long wait, but it's worth the wait. Don't do what I was going to do. Don't say you don't need the help. Say you need the help. Because, I mean, I was honest to Gary. I told him I was just going to say, sorry, don't need you, bye. And I'm so glad I didn't. Best thing ever done. I think I'm in the most positive place I've ever been in my life. I mean, you say for me needing people like my wife was strong through all my grief. And now, even though we've lost a wee baby, I'm actually the strong one for her. And I never thought I would be in this position where I would be strong for anyone. Mm-hmm. I just never dreamed in my life that I would ever tell this story. And I'm actually glad I could tell a story. Thank you to Gary, I say, for letting me do the story. I just hope whoever's listening that, you're not alone. I mean, you're going through maybe what I went through for the last 8 years. I mean, my depression story just wasn't 1 year. It was on and off since 2013. You might get people out there who'll say, well, you're a coward, you try to take your own life. But, I mean, there's people out there who's maybe thinking it, and my advice is don't do it. Seek help. Because there's always help, and when you get help, one day you'll be in a positive place too.
For sure. And like I said before, thank you so much, Chrissy. And this is going to go out live because Chrissy, we talked about it. I think this is important as well, Chrissy, let people know, is that we had spoken about doing this and just do it as a podcast, just as audio. But we had a discussion beforehand, and you've now sort of said, let's release it as a YouTube and a video because people need to put in a face to the name, and it relates a lot more. And I very much doubt that maybe a few months back that you'd ever dream of putting this on video and never mind audio form. So that just shows you the development you've made and the strength of character and the mindset you have right now. So thank you so much, and all the best.
Thank you very much, Corey. Thanks for having me on your show, mate. Thank you.